Bungo Stray Dogs is known for its action, humor, and mystery as shown throughout the series, as well as the many well-written storylines accompanying it. The series follows characters named after historical authors, and their characters are often based on their most popular or influential books. The series is also known for its amazing portrayal of mental health. The series follows the main character, Atsushi Nakajima, and the organization he works at called the Armed Detective Agency, an agency of ability users or those possessing superhuman abilities. There are popular organizations in the series that are antagonizing against the Armed Detective Agency, such as the Port Mafia, the Rats in the House of the Dead, the Decay of Angels, and the Guild. Although many of these organizations are important to the plot, the only ones that will be discussed are the Armed Detective Agency and the Port Mafia, and the former members of the Port Mafia and the current ones of the Port Mafia. Some of the most notable characters to be a part of the Armed Detective Agency are Dazai Osamu, Atsushi Nakajima, Kyouka Izumi, and Yosano Akiko. Former Port Mafia members include Kyouka and Dazai, although Yosano had some relations with the current boss of the Port Mafia. She was not a member of the organization. The Port Mafia character that will be talked about in the video will be Akutagawa Ryuunosuke. He is the one remaining character in the Port Mafia that portrays serious mental health issues that is dived into deeply. These characters have deep stories behind them and tend to have extremely traumatic experiences. Other characters like Atsushi and Akutagawa also have these deep-rooted issues, but these characters are rarely discussed when it comes to the topic of mental illness.
But be on the lookout, Atsushi. The Port Mafia is well known for carrying out surprise attacks. You should be extra vigilant at night.
Yosano is based off of the author Yosano Akiko, who was a Japanese poet with many controversial works. One of her most controversial works is Thou Shalt Not Die, which is also the character's ability. This ability makes her able to heal those with extreme injuries, including herself. This power also connects to the poem written by her author counterpart, where she states, "Oh, my young brother, I cry for you. Don't you understand? You must not die." The poem was addressed to her brother who went to fight in the Russo-Japanese War. The poem ultimately inspired her character and her development. Called the Angel of Death, Yosano was assigned to a medical unit at age 11 during a war in the series called the Great War, a battle between non-ability users and ability users. The lead of the medical unit was Port Mafia boss Mori Ogai, the one who found her for this job. Her job consisted of healing people with fatal injuries. These people who were once without hope were healed because of her. This made her job far more important than she thought it would be. She says, "I was treating soldiers once every 3 days, all repeat customers. That it became once a day, soon 3 times a day. A normal unit would have given up and retreated long ago, but that never happened, because I was there." Her ability, which was made to heal, was used as a weapon. It made the army stay where they were and fight back. Despite half of the soldiers being injured, she took away the right of retreat, as she would seemingly make every injury disappear. Her character slowly went from having the innocence and willpower of a child to having true understanding of the bloodshed that comes with the war, because Mori saw her as a miracle pet paramedic. She faced more and more patients coming to her aid because the unit failed to retreat. It would cause distress not only to her, but also to the soldiers, as they had to go back to the battlefield repeatedly. It was no longer a battle of life and death, but a battle of sheer determination the ability users would have to go back. One of the biggest events with her character is the death of a soldier close to her. Mori previously shot this soldier because Yosano refused to heal him along with other soldiers. She wanted to give back the right to lose to everyone. She was being emotionally manipulated into keeping people alive and watching people who should have died live again and again. And every reiteration of that person becomes more traumatized and fractured. The soldier ended up committing suicide because he kept being sent back to the battlefield and couldn't take the mental strain this put on him. She blamed herself for this because she was the sole reason for his mental deterioration. This also put a toll on her because she was forced to save everyone, but couldn't save the person she cared about most. After the death of her friend, she was said to have gone insane. She allegedly set off a series of explosives and was put in an asylum. Even after the war, I was kept in isolation and undergone in a mental facility. Not that I imagined I would have left, even if the door was open. Her ability made everyone's life seem inferior and pointless, so she wanted to stay away from the outside so she could never make anyone's life seem so purposeless again. She also didn't want to use her ability against people's will, as they would get greedy and want to use it, even if it would be destructive. She was eventually saved from the asylum by Rampo, a member of the Armed Detective Agency. This trauma is still very relevant to her character today. She has developed over time through her acceptance and seemingly redemption of herself. As known, the Armed Detective Agency fights for the well-being of people of all kinds. This seemingly helps people accept and redeem themselves, as many people in the Armed Detective Agency came from the Point Mafia or other intense backgrounds. Although it is clear that she has not forgiven herself for all the things her ability caused, she's working to redeem herself by working for good. Joining the agency gave her a choice in her life to work for the better and attempt to move on from the past. Her joining the agency shows that she is not naturally veering towards evil. She's trying to heal herself through healing others and finding redemption by doing the right thing, when she was forced to do the wrong thing for so long. She found a place where people wanted her not because of what she could do, but because who she is. She's finding healing from her trauma by being accepted for who she is rather than what she is. She accepted it, knowing it changed who she was, but she managed to hold on to her kindness, as if she ever lost that, she would have lost herself.
Tell me, Dazai, why is it you wish to die?
Let's turn that question around. Is there really any value to this thing we call living?
Dazai is one of the more in-depth characters in the series. His character development is one of his most important aspects, as he has multiple arcs that help the audience understand him more. His character focuses on 3 stories: Dazai Chuuya, age 15, the Dark Age, and the current timeline. Dazai Chuuya, age 15, focuses on the beginning of his life in the Mafia, while the Dark Age dives deeper into his character's darkness and why he left the Mafia. Dazai's character is based on the book No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai, a Japanese author who was famous for his depiction of cultural upheaval after the Second World War. He was also famous for his portrayal of complex feelings of despair and worthlessness. His works are considered modern classics and are very significant to Japanese culture. No Longer Human follows the main character Yozo, who reveals his true self to others by confronting his self-destructive behaviors and struggles connecting with others. No Longer Human is also the character's ability in Bungo Stray Dogs. His ability allows him to cancel out other abilities by touching them, but he cannot obtain them. In the series Dazai Chuuya, age 15, the audience is introduced to Dazai at 15. Obviously, due to the title. The series details what the 2 teenagers, Chuuya and Dazai, were like at this age, and how the 2 were introduced to the Mafia. Dazai had little to no values concerning his life, but instead for his line of work. He viewed himself as just a tool for violence and killing. During this time, we also got a chance to see the inside of his own mindset and the inner workings of such a complicated and broken character such as himself. The series starts when Dazai meets Mori after a failed suicide attempt to be healed to be a witness to the previous boss's death, so Mori could take over the Mafia. Mori trapped him into the Mafia by making him a witness, because if he were ever to leave, people would question the reality of Mori's authority, and if the boss actually left the position for Mori, or if he was murdered, which the former boss was. His issues were prevalent before, but now they are even more apparent as he was forced into a murderous organization and used as a weapon of violence. One of the most important moments with his character is after a battle with an organization that was going after the Mafia. After striking down a soldier, he points the gun at him and offers to cut his suffering short if he tells him what their motivations are. After hearing his reason, he shot the dying soldier repeatedly, saying,
This is more than you deserve.
This implies he thinks the soldier should have suffered more. He resents the soldier for being able to achieve death so easily and almost painlessly without any repercussions. This also gives us a glimpse into his mentality and how messed up it is for a 15-year-old. He wanted to achieve that death without any strings attached, and he wanted to die as conveniently. If he were to die, he would have left the whole organization in shambles, and Mori would have most likely been replaced by a new boss, which would have caused more damage. This kept him trapped entirely in a corner that seemed almost impossible to escape. and subsequently caused his issues to become worse as he was forced into something that he didn't want to be in. He eventually wanted to be in the Mafia to find a reason to live. His mental state was implied when Mori first found him. It is clear that he was not mentally well before the Mafia, and when he joined, it got worse, as shown. A good example of this in the series is there was a conversation between Mori and Dazai. "Tell me, Dazai, why is it you wish to die?" Let's turn that question around. Is there any point to this thing we call living? Dazai's suicidal tendencies seem to stem from this sentence. He's questioning why people choose to live through suffering and pain for a chance at being something. He finds his actions as pointless as anyone else's. Along with this, he admitted to staying in the Mafia not only because he was forced into the situation, but also because he wanted to find a reason for living by witnessing death up close. This proves how his mentality was so abnormal for a teenage boy and how dark he truly thought. Not only did he try to find his reason for living through bloodshed, but also by seeing others in pain up close. The Dark Age is one of the more complex character arcs in the story. It deals with the complexity of grief, depression, and betrayal. At the story's beginning, the audience is introduced to 3 key characters: Odasaku, Dazai, and Ongo. The 3 of them are close friends who meet at a bar after their work at the Port Mafia. They meet up, and the next day, Ongo goes missing. Odasaku is assigned to find him and recruits Dazai to help him. Ongo is revealed to have betrayed the organization and is with a rival organization named Mimic. The boss of Mimic has the same ability as Odasaku, which allows the two to see 5 seconds into the future. At the end of the story, the two end up killing each other. Dazai runs into the room to witness his friend's death, and Odasaku tells him to do good to find a reason to live. Odasaku is a close friend of Dazai's, who is seen as an older brother figure in his life. Oda is the only person who truly sees Dazai as the child he is, as stated. He's a sharp-witted, with a mind like a steel trap, and he's just a child. A sobbing child, abandoned in the darkness of a world far emptier than the one we're seeing. And in the anime, Oda also states,
"He is simply a child who happens to be exceptionally clever. A child crying in the dark, alone, left to fend for himself with a hole in his heart as large as the world itself. Now I regret not having stepped in to ease his loneliness."
Odasaku sees Dazai as a child in a world where everyone sees him as an adult in a killing machine used for the organization's benefit. This causes Dazai to get attached to him. Odasaku is one of the only people who Dazai truly put his trust in, both as a person and a friend, solely because he saw him for who he truly was, and not for the facade he put on. As cold as Dazai was at this time on the exterior, he showed himself as a child without fearing for Oda to find him weird, which shows a sense of vulnerability and comfort with his friend. After Odasaku's death, Dazai was deeply affected by the loss of his friend. The one person who saw him as he truly was gone, and he couldn't be replaced by someone else without guilt. His mental health is implied to have gotten worse after his death, as it still affects him in the current timeline. It was a monumental moment in his character development, showing how it brought him down from the ecstasy he felt by killing people. He became aware of all he did, and for a second, contemplated the actions that he thought would be the most optimal solution. It caused him to truly take in everything he had done and sacrificed for an organization that only made him want to die more than he did before. This not only affected his future decisions, but his worldview in total. After Oda's death, he kept the dying wish to live for good and help people by doing research on an organization named the Armed Detective Agency. He went into hiding for 4 years before joining so his crimes could be cleared by a special operations division. When introduced in the beginning of the series, Dazai was a character crafted for comedic relief. His attempts at suicide were made to be a joke not only for the audience, but to the characters in the show as well. The joke seemed absurd and detached from reality, which causes others to see it as comedic when it could possibly be a silent cry for help. Later on, although still used for comedic relief, his character becomes more serious. His former career in the port mafia is shown to have affected how he acts in the series, as his choices are now more thought out and far less erratic. Despite his maturing, it is clear that he has not yet moved on from the numerous events that happened while in the mafia. The death of Otosaku has caused the majority of his maturity. When an enemy of Dazai's died, he showed this maturity. No witty commentary? No, I'll leave this one be. His younger self would have most likely ridiculed the man for dying, but instead, he kept his mouth shut because he knew how it felt to lose someone who truly understood him. It's a delicate subject and he knows that, takes it into account, and leaves it be. Death is a subject that not only battled him, but battled the people he knew around him. Another example of his maturity is,
You don't actually know anything about God, do you?
Teach me, I'm listening.
God wants perfection and harmony. That's what you think? God cares more about your pores than he does that. He's famous for his coincidences and absurdism. I've seen it countless times.
The absurdism Dazai talks about is the deaths that he has witnessed. Everything about death has changed who he is, and that is no coincidence. The absurdity of his friend's death made him realize that that was meant to happen, and in no other universe would he be with him alive. Now with the armed detective agency, he has took the main character Atsushi under his wing. Dazai most likely sees himself in Atsushi and wants to turn him to the better that he wants to do. Atsushi sees Dazai as a good person, redeeming his past actions partially. He finds comfort in the man who has done hurt as a hurt person. Dazai sees Atsushi's hurt, and instead of using that hurt against him like he used to, he tries to heal him through it. Dazai redeems himself through a boy who he sees himself in. Although he has found a place where he can find comfort and safety, he still needs to find healing and peace in his life. Atsushi is the protagonist of Bungo Stray Dogs who deals with PTSD. His character is based on the short story The Moon Over the Mountain. The story focuses on the main character, Li Sheng, who falls into madness after failing to become a well-known poet. It causes a violent emotional shift, which comes with a physical consequence of turning into a tiger. The author is well known for his unique style of writing and his consideration of feelings of others and himself. The character's ability is called Beast Beneath the Moonlight, which allows the character to turn into a tiger, much like the main character of The Moon Over the Mountain, who turned into a tiger due to the violent emotional shift in his demeanor. Atsushi was an orphan who was kicked out of the orphanage at the age of 18. At the time, he didn't know he had an ability. He was frequently abused, starved, and overworked in his orphanage. This abuse was because of his ability. Everyone in the orphanage knew about his ability but him, so nobody would be friends with him, hang out with him, or go near him even. This caused self-destructive behavior at a young age. He questioned himself often and didn't understand why people were so afraid of who he was. After leaving, Atsushi was found by the armed detective agency members Dazai and Kunikita. They fed him and allowed him to go into the agency after completing a short exam. Joining the agency came with its own set of challenges. Atsushi faced frequent flashbacks that would affect his ability to work efficiently with others and himself. At one point, it became a part of his dreams, as shown when he passed out. It's you, of course. You hate me, don't you? I hate myself too. Atsushi hates his ability for what it caused in his life, and because he won't accept it, the ability won't accept him either. He goes through a state of hatred for himself and his ability. He tries to do good and help people, but his ability is needed for that to succeed. He is what he hates the most, and he relies on that ability to survive and help others. Atsushi is a very complex character. He deals with PTSD because his orphanage abandoned him and abused him. But because of this abuse, it altered him mentally because he had to face that as a child, and he still has to live with that abuse, and he still has to come to terms with it. And ultimately, that's something that's very hard for a young adult to do. There are people out in the world who still haven't healed from their trauma when they were 7, and they might be 40 now. And there are people who still haven't healed from that, and it might be because they haven't had the proper help, or it's because they just don't know how to heal. So dealing with that trauma as a young adult is very difficult. Atsushi is also complex because in the movie Dead Apple, this is the movie where he comes to terms with this thing that is inside of him, the thing that is him. He is his ability. That ability is him. And there is a kind of sense of acceptance that comes with that ability. Yes, this ability has driven my life to places where I didn't want it to go, but that ability is me. I would not be here without this ability, and although that would cause something in my life to be drastic, I still have it. And that's something that Atsushi probably has thought. And knowing how different that is, how different he is from others, it's hard to accept. There are a lot of things that people find hard to accept, and in this universe, the most hard to accept thing is abilities, partially because they cause damage and people see them as different and special, and they get treated differently than other normal people, and partially because abilities are dangerous. People see people with abilities as monsters, as destructive people. There are rumors about the armed detective agency that got spread around because of the things that ability users do. The Port Mafia is a great example of that, along with the Guild and the Decay of Angels, because these are all terrorist organizations. These are all terrorist organizations that use their abilities to do the wrong thing at the wrong time. And so because the Armed Detective Agency is such a complex, and so dealing with the concept of having a bunch of former Port Mafia members, a bunch of people with all these dangerous abilities, it's difficult to come to terms with. And yeah. So in Dead Apple, Atsushi comes to terms with this thing that is inside him. And he realizes that this ability helps him. And this ability is a part of him. And it's hard to accept in reality. I feel like he really should have accepted it more at first. But it takes a lot of maturity to realize that this is a part of you. And that's something that not even most adults can do. And he's 18 and he's struggling and he's doing all this. And I think that's really important to realize that it's Atsushi doing this. It's not some 30-year-old man or woman. It's Atsushi.
Why did you have to show me the light? Why did you have to go and give me hope?
Kyouka's character is based on the play Demon Pond, written by her author counterpart. The author was known for her differing writing style at that time and her works that would critique society. Demon Pond is about the desperation of humans interfering with the natural morals that come with humanity, and delves into the darkness of the human heart. The character's ability is called Demon Snow. It allows a figure to materialize and harm people, and only follows orders coming from a mobile phone, which she always carries on her person. Kyouka is a former Port Mafia member who is very important to the plot. Atsushi took her under his wing, and Atsushi stated that he feels as if she is a younger version of him. And Kyouka is she's 14. She's a young child, and she has committed murder. She has committed multiple crimes, and she has done so much bad in this world, and she's trying to redeem herself. Just like every other character in this series, she is trying to redeem herself, and she's trying to find this reason why she's here. She's trying to find why, in reality, she's actually here. She's trying to find a reason to be good. She's trying to be good. She's trying as hard as this girl is trying so hard. And it's so difficult to try and figure out that it's okay. Like, sometimes redeeming yourself is the best thing that you could do. It's the best thing for yourself, and it's the best thing for others. So, Kyouka deals with themes of suicide and abuse. She suffered abuse from Akutagawa. She was forced into the port mafia because she was orphaned by her parents, who were killed by their own abilities. And Kyouka inherited this ability. So, she hates her ability. She has eventually become more accepting of her ability, but she still hates it. She resents it for it killing her parents and it transferring to her. As of right now, she has tried to sacrifice herself 3 times. There's the first time on the train where Atsushi saved her, the second time on a boat, the third time to stop a huge airship from falling onto the city of which many people live in. She views herself as nothing but a murderer and someone who doesn't deserve to exist. And after spending some time with Atsushi, she picked up some of his beliefs that life is only worthwhile if you're using it to help others. And she somewhat believes that she's the same as him and that she can help others too. But she has a certain self-loathing that only a few characters in Bungo Stray Dogs can understand, such as Dazai and Atsushi and other people. And it's to the point where she would happily sacrifice herself if that meant that lives could be saved because of her. And this is kind of because of what Atsushi said. On the train, Kyouka was there to capture Atsushi, and she had no will to live. There was no will to remain in the mafia, and she was completely emotionless because of the abuse that she suffered from Akutagawa, the abuse that she suffered in the organization. She is just a child. This poor girl is just a child, and she's just trying to figure it out. She's just trying to figure out how to live her life. And it's seemingly impossible because she's stuck into this situation where it's either life or death. Like, if you leave the mafia, you're dead. If you betray the mafia, you're dead. If you go into the armed detective agency, you're still dead because the mafia is still going to try and come after you. A backup plan was initiated once her and her co-worker were defeated, and there was a bomb on her chest that was activated. And so she realized that the passengers on the train would die because of her. And she showed emotion for the first time, and she jumped off the train with the intention to die and not take anyone with her. At the end of her jumping off the train, Atsushi jumped off, saved her, and ripped the bomb off. And so ultimately she did live, but she did have the intention of committing suicide and dying to save other people. On the ship with Akutagawa and Atsushi fighting, she had stolen the detonator for the dynamite in the cargo, and she warns Atsushi to run right before she detonates it. In turn, she plans to take out Akutagawa and any other mafia members or allies on the ship, which would be going back on her resolve to never kill again. But as she is taking out someone who often kills others and plans to kill someone right next to her, it makes sense that she believes that taking out Akutagawa would save more lives. Plus, as she plans to be taken out too, she can disregard her morals as she won't be around to regret it. Now, the third time is when she stopped Moby Dick, a giant airship, from crashing into Yokohama, which is the place where she lives in, the place where all her friends live in, the people who accepted her. It was a no-brainer for her. She was in a very dark state after the run-in with another character. And she watched the only person who cares for her get beaten up and captured, and then she got herself captured by the government who wanted to kill her. She seemed to be in a depressed state on the transport, not responding to anything, not even when Dazai talks to her, even though he is one of the few people who can relate to her. She doesn't snap out of it until she hears Atsushi's voice and finds out what will happen to Yokohama. She decides to make the choice to sacrifice herself to save the city, understanding that she will die. she believes here that doing this will redeem herself by making her an actual agency member and solidifying herself on the side of good. Even if she dies there, she believes that she truly changed and could be a good person. That was the first time that she wanted something for herself from her death. And that was her last suicide attempt. Kyouka's suicide attempts really explain what type of character she is and what type of person she is overall. She was forced into the mafia, and in a lot of cases, that's not what a person wants to do. She wants to be good, and she wants to do the good that she really wants to do. But it seems impossible at the time. And that's seen with so many people. It's seen with so many people, it's insane. The show uses the same arc over and over again.
Yes. You're actually gonna team up and fight with me? Yes. What did you have for dinner last night? Yes.
Akutagawa's character was based on the book Rashomon by his author counterpart. The author was known for being one of the first pre-war Japanese writers to achieve a wide foreign readership. Rashomon follows a man on the brink of death who must decide between maintaining his morals and dying or becoming a thief to save his own life. It is commonly known for its themes of morality and survival. The character's ability is called Rashomon, and it allows Akutagawa to transform his overcoat into a black, thread-like substance with a high attack of power and defense. Akutagawa is a character that's not really talked about or dived into, but I felt he was important to add on, as it brings a loop into the story that is very important, I feel, when it's about mental health representation. He deals with themes of abuse, and he is definitely a victim of abuse, and he was abusive. But there's a whole nother thing. Dazai abused him. He was under Dazai's training, and he was abused physically and emotionally. He was told that he wasn't worth anything. He was told he wasn't good enough for the mafia, and his ability wasn't good enough. He wasn't good enough. He wasn't trained enough for that. It was something that really does affect him now. Dazai did some horrible, horrible things to him. He tried to kill him. He tried so many things that just didn't work, and Akutagawa has to live with that. But instead of living with it, he goes into sort of like this denial that this is his reason to live. Like, it's his reason to live is to be good to Dazai and to prove to Dazai that he is formidable. And that's his goal. Like, that's what he wants. That's what Akutagawa wants. Dazai knows that Akutagawa wants his approval, and Dazai chooses to ignore that, which only digs him deeper into wanting his approval. And I feel like that is such an awful thing. Like, you don't know what someone is going through and all that, and Dazai knows what he's going through, and he chooses to ignore it and to take it for granted. The abuse cycle in Bungo Stray Dogs goes from Mori to Yosano, and fortunately Yosano doesn't do anything to anyone that we know of. But from Mori it goes to Dazai, which goes to Akutagawa, which goes to Kyouka. Dazai was definitely emotionally manipulated into different situations where he didn't want to. He was forced into situations that he didn't want to be forced into. He was forced to do things that he didn't want to do. And ultimately that caused sort of like a loop. And so when he was under Mori, he probably got some really rough training, and it was most likely normalized for him and for other people. And so when it moved to Dazai, it moved to Akutagawa because Akutagawa was under his training, and he took out his pain and anger onto Akutagawa, as seen in multiple other situations. And so the pain that Akutagawa endured was passed on to Kyouka. It's an abuse cycle, and Kyouka breaks free from that cycle. And it's about what people do. You learn from other people and you take on these behaviors of other people, which is why abuse cycles are so dangerous, and Bungo Stray Dogs portrays it very well. In conclusion, Bungo Stray Dogs is a very well representation of media, and other representations in media aren't as well, and the standard should be where Bungo Stray Dogs is. Although there are some representations that aren't accurate and aren't well represented, there are very well representations of depression, PTSD, and abuse, and other heavy topics that are talked about in Bungo Stray Dogs. I feel like Bungo Stray Dogs is such a perfect portrayal of mental health and what people deal with sometimes on the daily. And that is the video essay. That is what I decided to do.